Yogena chittasya padena vacham malam sarirasya cha vaidyakena yopakurotam pravaram muninam patanjalim pranchaliranatosmi stuve patanjalim vyasam shankaram cha munitrayam kartrasutasya bhashyasya kramadvivaranasya cha. So, welcome and good evening everyone. This is the first session in this new year. So my New Year greetings, of course. So now, today I'm planning to give a short review of the entire Yoga Sutra tradition in general. And before that, I'm going to speak just a few words. That's because I received a number of emails, and then a few days ago I discussed with some senior teachers in our tradition. So there are a number of people who have many wrong notions about yoga. Now, one important reason why frequently we have wrong notions about yoga. For example, yoga is part of one particular religious tradition coming from Asia, and you are, without your being aware of it, you are practicing some religious rituals when you chant some of the mantras like Om, or when you meditate, when you sit in Padmasana, you are actually doing some religious rituals. So you are, in a way, you are indirectly introduced to an alien religious tradition. And of course, there are various shades of misunderstanding. It's very difficult to clear them. Now, one important reason why many of these misunderstandings are prevailing in society, one important reason is Yoga Sutras are not taught according to the traditional interpreters of the Patanjali system. That is one important reason. If any of you read, let us say, different commentaries, Vyasa's Bhashya, that's the first attempt to expound Yoga Sutras, 195 sutras, or Shankaracharya's Vivarana, which is based on Vyasa's commentary, or Tattwamayananda, written by Vajaspati, Rajamartanda, written by Bhojaraja, or Yoga Bhashya Vartikam is well known, written by Vijnana Bhikshu, Yoga Maniprabha, written by Ramananda Saraswati, or Yoga Sudhagaram, written by Sadasivendra Saraswati, Yoga Pradipika by Bhavaganesha Dikshita, Yoga Sutra Vritti by Nagoji Bhatta, and Yoga Siddhanta Chandrika by Narayana Tirtha. These are all important commentaries on Yoga Sutras. 8 important commentaries in addition to Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, Vyasa's commentary, and Shankaracharya's Vivarana. So altogether you find these 11 important works expounding Yoga Sutra. Now, in none of these commentaries will you ever come across anything like, believing in a particular kind of religious tradition. You don't find anything sectarian or narrow-minded in any of these commentaries. Very rational, very scientific. Now, and another important reason why these misunderstandings are very common, people mix up yoga with tantra and then talk about yoga, tantra, chakras, kundalinis, all days in the same breath. Now, actually, it is very unfortunate And also it is very tragic that such a wonderful, excellent system of mental health and physical health and mental and physical well-being, a system of mental and physical exercises which can be practiced by any person, including non-believers and atheists. And that's interesting. There are many people who don't believe in any religious tradition, but who live very pure, simple, unselfish lives. They also practice yoga systems without believing in any god. So the point is they mix up all this together. And sometimes we find people who claim, I studied Kashmir Tantrism, as they pronounce it, in about 3 months. Then I studied Ayurveda in about 3 months. Then they mastered Kundalini, 7 chakras, and so on. Now please remember, according to traditional teachers, each of these practices involves several years of intense, dedicated disciplining of mind, thoughts, and body under an experienced master. For several years of practice. Now what is happening is, without following any of these important disciplines, people start practicing breathing exercises and then they get excited. So, and I have mentioned innumerable classes in this series. Again and again I have mentioned, without being fully established in yamas and niyamas, no one should undertake practice of breathing exercises or complicated physical postures like Sishasana and there are Siddhasana, some of these postures. Now, and Patanjali, Vyasa, and also the teachers of mainstream Hatha Yoga, the authors of Hatha Yoga Pratipika or Gheranta Samhita, they're all unanimous in their assertion that one should practice discipline in terms of lifestyle, food habits, even associating people. Otherwise, what is happening is you are actually heading for trouble. So most of the wrong notions about yoga, the yoga is something terrible. There are many people claim that they practice tantra, yoga, kundalini, chakra, everything for less than a year, and they got into trouble. So yoga is bad, yoga is evil. It is all absolutely wrong. Of course, there are other people who have used stronger language because for actually disparaging such an excellent ancient meditative system. Now, one important aspect of yoga is yoga doesn't really mean standing on your head. Yoga doesn't mean breathing exercises. Yoga is nothing but going deeper into our own being, our own essence, and practicing some higher fundamental ethical moral values. Yoga is an attempt to take evolution at a higher level. This is an important thing. It is mentioned again and again in innumerable sutras, especially in the Kaivalyapada, find. Yoga is nothing but an attempt to take evolution to a higher level. Physical evolution is no more possible. But there are higher possibilities for all human beings. We can become better human beings. We can become more disciplined. We can become more self-restrained. We can practice yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, samadhi. 8 parts of which yamas and niyamas constitute some of the basic, fundamental, ethical, moral and spiritual disciplines which are applicable for every person, irrespective of what religion he or she is practicing or whether he or she is a believer in God at all. Even non-believers and non-believers and non-conformists and atheists can practice values like non-violence, contentment, purity of thought, purity lifestyle. All these are values which everyone can practice. So this is an important thing to remember. Now, where is the main difference? The line of demarcation is this. If you get a teacher who has some mastery and understanding of the traditional interpretations of yoga, that teacher will never tell you, that teacher will never allow you even to practice intense breathing exercises without the supervision of a teacher, because it is very clearly mentioned. But people, they exercise a lot of liberty and freedom, and they practice some of these disciplines which are really not part of Patanjali yoga system. Breathing exercises that which called pranayama, which are very popular, Patanjali doesn't pay much attention at all. Patanjali is only talking about some minor forms of exhaling, inhaling, and of course retention. Patanjali is not talking about, he is not expounding an elaborate system of breathing exercises which are being taught by mainstream teachers of Hatha Yoga. So that's why frequently we put all the blame on Patanjali, saying that this man brought this terrible form of yoga, which is something very bad, very evil, and it is actually Hinduism coming incognito. It's not at all. Yoga is nothing but discovering the spiritual element that is present in all of us. Even if we are non-believers and atheists, we can connect with some of the sublime, beautiful, some of the charming elements of our own characteristics, our own nature. That's what yoga is all about. So I just wanted to make these observations at the beginning of this class. Now I would like to give a brief survey of what we have been discussing so far, because we have now reached the 16th sutra of Kaivalyapada. That's what we have been discussing till the last session. The 16th sutra is Nacha eka chitta tantram vastu tad apramanagam tada kim syad. Actually, I mentioned earlier that this is nothing but a reference to one particular school of Indian philosophy, which actually is not Vedanta philosophy. It is one of the four schools of later Buddhism, which started evolving 400 years after Buddha's passing away. It is called the Vijnanavada or Yogacara system, a kind of subjective idealism, which refuses to accept the reality of what we see with our own eyes at the empirical level. So they reject the reality of external objects. So that particular view of totally rejecting what we perceive in the name of momentariness, that view is not acceptable to Patanjali. It is not acceptable to yoga philosophers. So Patanjali is asserting that these external objects are actually real by themselves, by virtue of their own existence. That's where we have reached till the last session, that is 16th sutra of Kaivalyapada, 4th chapter. So I would like to say a few words. Maybe I may spend the rest of my session right now giving a review of what we have been discussing till the last session. So please remember, Yoga Sutras are divided into 4 chapters. Altogether 195 sutras divided into 4 chapters. The printed book that you buy from bookstores will be divided into 4 chapters. Like first one is Samadhipada, second chapter is Vibhudipada. The second chapter is Sadhanapada, third chapter is Vibhudipada, fourth chapter is Kaivalyapada. So the printed book that you normally get, it will be like this: first Samadhipada, then Sadhanapada, then Vibhudipada, then Kaivalyapada. So Samadhi means concentration, Sadhana means practice, Vibhuti means the results or consequences the powers that you derive by the practice of yoga, and the fourth one is always liberation. These are 4 chapters. In our present session, we were slightly altering the order of the chapters, because we all start with some preliminary practices, that is sadhanapada. But at the same time, in Patanjali's system, many of the definitions appear in the samadhipada. So we first discussed about 14 sutras, the first 14 sutras of samadhipada. Then we actually began with sadhanapada. So that's why, the first sutra in sadhanapada itself is stepping into yoga. So what is yoga here in this context? Yoga is nothing but stepping into another possibility of human evolution. It is not biological evolution, obviously. It is spiritual evolution. Evolution in terms of some of the values, some of the cultural aspects of our own growth and personality. So that's why, for example, Tapa, Swadhyaya, Ishvara Panidhananani, Kriya Yoga. This is the kindergarten of yoga. It is a kindergarten for any person who is an aspirant for higher life. No matter what religious tradition you belong to, or whether you belong to any religion at all. Even if you are totally opposed to religious practices, you can be a great yogi. That is the universality of Patanjali's system. It is so broad, so universal, and based on some of the fundamental spiritual values that every person can practice. That is Tapa, Swadhyaya, Ishvara Panidhananani, Kriya Yoga. Kriya Yoga is nothing but this: practicing some austerities like self-control, self-restraint, self-study. Here self-study means reading some higher books, feeding our mind with some higher thoughts. And again, it is more easily recognizable or intelligible to traditional believers in religion. Self-surrender. Ishvara Pranidhana means self-surrender. They can be easily understood if you read the lives of great saints or great saintly persons in all traditions. And then, of course, some kind of physical activities with a sense of dedication and unselfishness, which generate spiritual energy within all of us. So it can be practiced by anyone. If a person, for example, if he is suffering from restlessness, or if he is suffering from any kind of discontent, no satisfaction, if he does something good, at the physical level, anyone can do. You can go to a public place and clean that spot. You can clean up the place. You can go to a Rotary Club. You can do some service without receiving a payment. It serves. If you are a teacher, you can give free tuition sessions to students who may not be able to afford to pay tuition fees. So any of these activities can be Kriya Yoga. Just imagine, not only worshipping in a temple or a church, it is perfectly wonderful. If you can do that, that is perfectly okay. But even beyond that, coming down to the common, the most common empirical level, any kind of noble, physical, intellectual, or mental activity with a sense of sanctity, self-control and dedication without any selfishness, that is Kriya Yoga. In fact, this is the alphabet of yoga. Anyone can practice it. When you read these great Sanskrit sentences, we think, oh, it is some kind of exotic, old, archaic Hindu religious ritual. Not at all. That's because people want to make too much of these, because they want, without really understanding the meaning of many of the Sanskrit words, and without even hearing or without ever having heard of the great commentaries. I listed 11, no less than 11 important commentaries in yoga system. Many people, many modern exponents have not read even one of them, either in translation, of course, not at all, never in original. Still, they put up some kind of some symbols and metaphors, and they say this is something exotic, some kind of oriented, religious something. That's the main. So actually, Patanjali is talking about what every human being can practice, Kriya Yoga. Just imagine. And then, of course, I'm just giving an example of the universality and simplicity and the rational nature of many of the yoga practices. Again, if you keep, for example, avidya, asmita, raga, dvesha, abhiniveshaha, pancha kleshaha. Kleshas are nothing but the causes of restlessness, disturbance in our mind, internal conflicts, which manifest in so many different ways. We feel always a kind of inner emptiness. People feel that, especially during Corona time, everyone can understand what it means to feel depressed. Not easy to escape the real implication of this sutra. And what is the reason? Raga, dvesha, abhinivesha. Our extreme likes for certain things, our extreme aversion to certain things. This every human being practices. You need not be a believer in any particular religion or God to practice extreme liking, some kind of infatuation for certain things, and its opposite, extreme dislike for certain things. And then what happens? A kind of clinging to this. This is something everyone can understand. This is how Patanjali begins uncovering the world of human mind. What is going on within our mind? So how we can improve our own emotional life? How we can improve our inner world of mind? And then, of course, as he goes ahead, he says there is a way to go beyond this. And he says, for example, in the 15th Sutra of Sadhanapada, there is an interesting, it's a discussion, it is actually a definition of parinama dukkha. I want to just refer to some of the sutras to give an example of how we have progressed from Kriya Yoga to the present state. In the Parinama Dukkha, Patanjali will talk about giving a higher interpretation to our inner conflicts. For example, he says, Parinama, Tapa, Samskara, Dukkaihi, Guna Visheshacha, Dukkhameva Sarvam Vivekinaha. Now, if you really practice some higher values, what you are actually doing is, you are learning to worry about something higher than worrying about your own problems. So you are actually giving a promotion to the problem of worry. That is Parinama Dukkha. And then he says, this Parinama Dukkha is possible only for highly evolved persons. Parinama Dukkha nama patikula skhavastayamabi yoginameva Krishna. This is Vyasa's commentary. He says, only yogis can be affected by Parinama Dukkha. So what is Parinama Dukkha? We give the classical example of Buddha. Buddha had a problem. He had worry when he found a sick man, old man, and dead person, a dead body being taken to cremation ground. The reality of sickness, old age, and death suddenly opened a new mystery before him, and he was affected. So how to find a solution to this? Buddha was not actually worrying about himself or his family or his own problems. He was worrying about the problem of humanity, the problem of all of us. Because, of course, this worry is possible only for a highly evolved person. That's why, Vyasa in his commentary says, Parinama Dukkhada Nama Yoginam Eva Krishnadi. That kind of dukkha is possible. Dukkha here doesn't mean worrying, crying, or always unhappy. No, there is no unhappiness in dukkha. Rather, there is an aspiration for something sublime and higher. That's the real meaning of dukkha. When you realize the momentariness or the limitation of all these empirical worldly things, then you become convinced of the transient nature of all that we experience in our everyday life. And then you start thinking, you start inquiring, you start searching for something eternal, something transcendental. That's because you are convinced of the non-eternal nature, the momentariness, the transient nature of all these worldly things. Money, a person who piles up a huge amount of money, suddenly he listens to something on Buddha and he realizes, oh, this money I'm not going to take with me when I'm going to die. When I get 100 years old, I have to die. I'm not going to take this money with me. Suddenly he becomes, oh yes, there is such a possibility. I can't escape it. So you suddenly realize the limitation of all that you are striving to achieve. Everything in this world. And then you actually go to the library, you read a book on mysticism, or you read some books on higher values or whatever it is. So actually it's a promotion. That's what actually yoga is. That's Atha Yoga Anuशासनम. In fact, that is the first sutra. Atha Yoga Anuशासनम. Atha means now onwards, henceforth. Now, there is no other way because all the other doors are closed. You went on knocking at various doors in search of something which would give you contentment and happiness and joy. So you got a big job, made a lot of money, big home, lot of reputation, everything that you can be proud of, or everything that you thought by mistake, everything that will give you permanent satisfaction. Then you realize it is not possible. That movement is indicated by the word Atha. In fact, that is the first sutra of Samadhipada. Most of the texts begin with that sutra. Atha Yoga Anuशासनम. Now, you have to get this instruction in yoga. So what is yoga means? Yoga means higher life. You are switching your evolution to a higher level. The biological evolution has reached its natural termination. Nothing more is possible. So now, of course, we have developed many other faculties. Intellectual evolution, evolution of IQ, all that. But still, that doesn't give us permanent satisfaction. So there is a problem here. It's not so obvious. There's a problem. That's why the richest man is certainly not the happiest man. The highest paid man is not the happiest, necessarily. So what happens? You look for something higher. That moment of looking for something higher, something transcendental, it is called Atha Yoga Anuशासनम. So even transcendentalism actually is nothing but a search for something transcendental. It's like a yoga only. People think that what Patanjali said is the Sanskrit statement standing on your head, that is yoga. Actually, maybe Emerson was a real yogi, not somebody who stands on your head. Or your head, not on his head, of course. Emerson was a real yogi. Because you are looking for something higher and transcendental. This man, Henry Thoreau, who walked from place to place, identifying himself with nature, not happy when the railroad was intruding into the forest because that will destroy the forest and trees, so he was not very happy about it. He was a real yogi. See, yogi is not somebody who stands on his head. Yogi is somebody who really wants to stand on his feet in the spiritual sense of that term. Standing on means spiritual self-reliance. That is the time when you develop the parinama dukkha. So that's why the Samadhipada, where the first 14 sutras contain many of the definitions, like what is vritti, Vutaya Panchadaya, Klishta, Pramana, Vikalpa Nidra Smrudaya. You can find all these definitions and listing of vrittis you find in the Samadhipada. So the point is that Atha stands for this beginning of the search for a higher possibility in our evolution at the spiritual level. And this is Sadhanapada. And as you go in search of this higher possibility, you may come across many problems. Problems which are called antarayas, obstacles, mental obstacles, physical obstacles. So vyadhis, dhyana, etc., alasya, and so on. Laziness, a feeling of discontentment, not attaining what you goal, and delusions, all wrong feelings which will come. And Patanjali insists in those context, she insists that we should first of all begin our practice with some disciplines like yama, niyama, ahimsa, satya, steya, brahmacharya, parigraha, all these are listed here. And then we discuss Samadhipada. We call the Samprajnata and Asamprajnata Samadhis. So sometimes people think that they can do, but if they work hard, they can reach Samadhi. Now, Samadhi, in a way, it is something that comes to us when we make progress in spiritual life. We don't attain Samadhi. Samadhi comes to us. Actually, it's like climbing Mount Everest. If you climb enough, then actually the top of the mountain is coming to you when you approach it. So when you get rid of all the vrittis, that is yoga, chitta, vritti, nirodhaka. In the Samadhipada you find yoga is defined. Getting rid of all vrittis, which I mean transcending the pull of vrittis, vasanas and samskaras. Going beyond this cycle of karma, vritti, samskara, sankalpa, vasana, karma, vritti, samskara, like that. This cycle continues. Whatever we do, it creates an impression, becomes a vritti, becomes a samskara, a natural tendency. We cannot escape from it unless we practice Kriya Yoga. When our mind is full of full of negative vrittis, negative samskaras, we can't meditate, we can't practice ahimsa, we can't practice truthfulness or non-violence, because the natural samskaras which are related to violent tendencies will prevent our effort, will stand in the way of our effort to develop positive samskaras like non-violence. So deliberately we must practice some disciplines called Kriya Yoga. Slowly our mind also accumulates more and more positive samskaras. So negative samskaras get weakened, and then slowly we transcend all this at two different levels. That is Samprajnata Samadhi and Asamprajnata Samadhi, which is actually called Yogaka. That is transcending, going beyond cessation of all vrittis. And that is the ultimate goal. When you reach that goal, you attain liberation, which is discussed in the 4th chapter, Kaivalyapada. And for this, there is a main royal highway that is expounded in the yoga system. It is called Ashtanga Yoga. Ahimsa, Satya, Asteya, Brahmacharya, Aparigraha. First one, universal disciplines like non-violence, non-stealing, non-possessiveness, purity of life, and then contentment, austerity, feeding our mind with good spiritual food, a sense of resignation to higher power, and so on. When we do this, our mind becomes ready for practicing meditation. Stage 1 is called dharana, Stage 2 is called dhyana, and the last stage, the eighth stage is called samadhi. So what we are doing is we are actually opening a new possibility for higher evolution, an evolution that goes beyond the level of physical or biological evolution. And then in the 16th sutra, as I mentioned earlier, I already discussed this earlier, Patanjali mentions one important thing, that we do not accept the Yogacara view that external objects are unreal. So I already discussed this for some time. I will take it up again. So the sutra is na cha eka chitta tandram vastu tad apramanagam tada kim syad. So this sutra is, sometimes you don't find this sutra in certain versions. For example, Bhoja wrote the Rajamartanda, it's a commentary or Tiga on Patanjali Sutra. You don't find this. Sometimes some scholars will argue that this was taken from the Bhashya of Vyasa, and then later by later scholars detached from Vyasa's commentary and was treated as a separate sutra. This is of course one view. So what this essentially means is this. The first thing is, so this aphorism tells you that the objective world is not unreal as asserted by the Yogacara or Vijnanavada Buddhist. I already gave a detailed exposition of these four schools of yoga, Buddhist philosophy. That is, two schools of idealism and two schools of realism. I have plans to begin, after this Yoga Sutra, I have plans to begin a detailed exposition of different systems of Indian philosophy, including, of course, because different schools of Buddhism are treated as parts of Indian philosophical tradition. But anyway, now just a kind of recapitulation. Buddha did not actually teach any metaphysical system. What Buddha did was, he preached in the language of the common man in the street in the 6th century BC in India, mostly northern hemisphere of northern part of India. So, and that was the time when the common people spoke in Prakrit, and they used Pali as their literary form, and the scholars, they debated in Sanskrit. So, because Buddha spoke in the language of the common man, many of his teachings were not properly recorded, but 80 years, according to many scholars, after his passing away, in the first Buddhist council, which was held in Rajagriha in today's Bihar state of India, not far from the place Bodh Gaya where Buddha actually attained enlightenment. The first Buddhist council, which was attended by Buddhist monks from today's Afghanistan, today's Pakistan, which is part of Indian subcontinent, today's Sri Lanka, Burma, and all these places. They came, and many of them remembered the original teachings of Buddha, and they were all recorded in Pali language. It's called Pali Canon, it's Pali canonical literature. And it is known as Tripitakas, means three baskets, three collections of Buddha's teachings, which together contain the important disciplines of Buddhist monastic order, and of course many of the fundamental teachings like momentariness, pratitya samutpada, which are part of mainstream Buddhism, were also included in this. Sutta Pitaka, for example, contained Dhammapada, which is perhaps the most well-known book, philosophical and ethical book in the context of Buddhism. It's a Pali canonical literature, Dhammapada. This happened 80 years after Buddha passing away. So, according to many scholars, Buddha passed away in 460 BC or 480 BC. That's one of the calculations. This may have happened in around 400 BC. Now, 300 years later, maybe from 1st century onwards, 4 distinct schools of Buddhism began to evolve. And most of them wrote their fundamental texts in Sanskrit and not in Pali. That's because a large number of the Hindu elites, Sanskrit educated Vedic scholars, they flocked into Buddhism. They became great Buddhist scholars and Buddhist monks. And as a result of the influence of these Sanskrit Pandits who became Buddhists, 4 distinct schools of Buddhism emerged. 2 schools belonging to Hinayana system, which is prevalent in countries like Thailand, Burma, Ceylon, that is Sri Lanka, and many of these countries. Hinayana Buddhism, they mostly depend upon the Pali canon. And then the Mahayana system, which is more broad-based, which is more or less prevalent in China, Japan, and all these countries. So, and in the Mahayana system, there were 2 schools of idealism. One is Yogacara. It has got another name called Vijnanavada. They were called Yogacara philosophers because they were supposed to be great practitioners of yoga. Yoga is a meditation and all these postures. That means, what does it mean? The Yogacara system was practiced with a Buddhists who did not believe in a creator God, really speaking. So you can find many of the postures of the ancient Buddhist books, they sit in Padmasana posture. Buddha himself can be seen seated in Padmasana posture. The other school was Shunyavada, which is the school of philosophy propagated by Nagarjuna. The well-known book is called Madhyamika Karika. The other 2 schools of realism are called Sautrantika and Vaibhashikas. Now, in this particular sutra, Nacha ekachitta tantram vastu tat apramanagam tada kim siyat. In this particular sutra, Patanjali is referring to as the school of philosophy known as Yogacara or Vijnanavada, which emphasized in the unreality of external objects. And the argument that Patanjali puts forward in the sutra and later in Vyasa's commentary is this, that is, a thing is an object of knowledge to many and is not conceived by the mind of one individual. So an external object is seen and experienced by many people. So that itself shows that it is not the product of human mind. The Yogacara Buddhist Vijnanavadins, they believed that a thing exists only so long as the awareness of its existence exists in your mind. When you are not at all aware of it, it is as good as non-existent. But the argument that Patanjali puts forward is this one. That is, an object is common to all people. Whether you are seeing that object or not, it is common to all people. In the previous Bhashya, Vyasa says, Bhagujitta valim bhani bhudam ekam vastu sadharanam tad khalu na ekachitta parikalpidam nyayena napi anekachitta parikalpidam kindu supradisthidam. That means, it is supradisthita means an object exists by virtue of its own existence. Napi anekachitta parikalpidam or ekachitta parikalpidam. Whether it is experienced or seen by one person or by one mind or many minds, an external object exists irrespective of whether you are aware of its existence or not. So you can find Patanjali takes a much more realistic approach to this subject. He was a realist. He did not dismiss the existence of external objects altogether. The difference between Patanjali and Advaita philosophy is this. Advaitins also accept the reality of what you see in front of you. But they will tell you, it is there. It is not an ontological non-existence. It is there, but it is only relative. What you see, whatever you see, with your mind and senses, for the very simple reason that you are seeing it, that is a valid reason to believe that it is not eternal, but it is not unreal in the absolute sense. It is relative. See, if you are seeing in front of your chair, the chair is not non-existent. But the very fact that you are seeing that chair shows that that chair has a form. So it has a name. And whatever has got a form and name is existing, but it goes on changing. So whatever is subject to changes cannot be absolutely real, can only be relatively real. It is called Vyavaharika Satta. This is the main difference. Though, so I'm sure that is a bit, we are actually, compared to this, the ordinary sutras are very simple, but here, to give the full picture of Patanjali's reference to Vijnanavadins, I have to unravel the whole metaphysical background. So I will stop now. We will continue again in the next session. We will continue from 16th Sutra of Kaivalyapada, which again there will be more discussions on other systems of Indian philosophy. Lot of comparative studies will be there. I shall try to make it as simple and as brief as humanly possible. So now we can open questions. You are most welcome to ask questions. Okay. Yeah.
Pranam Swamiji.
Yeah.
Thank you for the overview. One question I have related to the overview is in the first chapter, in the 30th Sutra, I think the antarayas are discussed. And then in the second chapter, kleshas are discussed. The difference between the two is not very clear to me.
Okay. You know, actually, the reason for antarayas is kleshas. If you don't have raga, dvesha and abhinivesha, you cannot have Bhranti Darsana, Alasya, or this kind of 9 antarayas which are mentioned in the 30th Sutra. So you cannot have any of these antarayas unless you have avidya. And because you have avidya, you have got, the asmida, raga, dvesha, abhinivesha. So the foundation for antarayas is the panchakleshas. Without that, in fact, these raga, dvesha and abhinivesha, they take various forms, and those external forms or the manifestations of these raga, dvesha and abhinivesha are called antarayas. This idea behind.
Thank you, Swami.
Yeah.
Maharaj, can you refer the sutra number for the description of raga, kleshas and...
Okay, okay, now you come to the sadhana pada. Just a minute, I shall.
2.3, Swami.
Yeah, it is third sutra. Avidya, asmida, raga, dvesha, abhiniveshaha, panchakleshaha. Actually, human memories and reminiscences will create certain types of obsessions in our mind, and these obsessions take various forms: extreme aversion to certain things, extreme liking or attachment to certain things, and some kind of irrational fear. These are 3 manifestations of human mind, mostly because of memories play an important role. More or less in modern psychiatry also, memories are a big problem. When you are given medicines, actually your ability to remember is benumbed, which actually damages the mental system. Memories crop up in the mind again and again and creates irrational fears. So, and it is actually this dvesha. And again, dvesha doesn't appear independently. It has got the other side of the coin is called raga.
Swamiji, may I ask a follow-up question on a different topic?
Yeah.
So, you mentioned about the unreality of the world, and one of the arguments that is posed is somebody else is experiencing the world and I am experiencing, therefore it may not be totally real or unreal, but therefore it exists. How do Vedantis answer the following argument? In Susupti state, we do not experience the world. How do they address the reality or unreality based on that experience in Susupti?
In Susupti, we do perceive, but we don't. Our ability to experience the perception at the time of Susupti doesn't exist. That's why after Susupti, when you come back, you don't forget the fact that you had a good Susupti. That's a classic aham, sukham, masu, apsa means when actually, in fact, the natural human aspiration for deep sleep itself shows that you are experiencing something sublime in deep sleep, actually. Nobody wants nightmares. Nightmares we experience, but Susupti we experience. Our ability to perceive duality is suspended, mind is shut down at that time. But remember, mind is shut down, you are not shut down. The awareness, the consciousness, the Atman within you, it can never shut down. But your ability to perceive it at the time of perceiving it, your ability to be aware of it at the time of your experiencing it, that faculty is suspended. And that faculty reawakens when you come out of Susupti or deep sleep. So that's why you remember that you had a wonderful experience. You feel rested. For a human being, real rest happens only when you suspend your ability to pursue something or somebody else. So long as you are perceiving something or somebody else other than yourself, you cannot have complete rest. In Susupti, that's why Susupti is next door neighbor to Samadhi. Not the same person, because there are some similarities. The similarity is the duality is suspended. Your ability to perceive and experience duality is suspended in Susupti or deep sleep. In Samadhi, it is transcended. Transcendence is a conscious process. But shutting down is an unconscious process. That's why anesthesia doesn't give you the sense of restfulness which Susupti gives you. It's an important thing. People feel restless when they come out of anesthesia. From a physiological point of view, what Susupti gives you, anesthesia should give you, actually. But it doesn't happen. Because anesthesia is enforced Susupti, enforced by medicine. Hypnotism is also same thing. So in Shankaracharya's Bhashya literature, you find Murcha is called Murcha. Murcha is an experience when you fall down. Perhaps if people suffering from epilepsy, they undergo this experience. But that's certainly not a very restful experience. So anesthesia doesn't give you a restful experience. You are not aware of any pain when you are under the power of that medicine, but you are certainly not experiencing some kind of an infinite feeling of restfulness that you experience in deep sleep or sushupti. So sushupti is a time when your mind naturally, effortlessly shuts down. There are two different things: enforced suspension and natural suspension of the faculty to perceive duality. These are two different things.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Yeah.
Swamiji, there's a comment on YouTube that mentions how much what you're saying is aligned, how much alignment there is with what you've stated with Western practices of psychiatry. But in many classes you said that Western psychiatry only goes so far. And comparably, you've noted in prior classes that Hatha Yoga teacher training certification programs do include some study of Patanjali and Yoga Sutras and Vedanta, but you have encouraged that we go further.
Okay.
So in both cases, I think that you have pointed to some omissions that we can take seriously.
Yeah. Could you mention psychiatry? What do you mean?
Western practice of psychiatric medicine.
That's right. That's psychiatry. Of course, I think if you study yoga and Vedanta, especially yoga, Patanjali system, it can make a great contribution to modern psychiatry. I think so that it is possible, because the enforced suspension of your ability to feel pain comes at a terrible cost. Terrible cost, actually. You have to suffer, you have to pay price for it if you suspend your faculty to experience pain. But then in modern medical, it is unavoidable, it is inescapable, no doubt about it. But the point is made in yoga system, that's all. The whole purpose of yoga is to consciously, with full awareness, climb the ladder of evolution to the next phase. That is the whole purpose. Ashtanga yoga is nothing but this royal road leading to higher evolution.
I recall you also mentioning that the mind alone, without witnessing itself, can't heal the mind.
Yeah, it can be. Yeah, true. Yeah.
Thank you, Maharaj.
So thank you so much.
There's another hand up. Sri Ram has a hand up.
Yeah, most welcome.
Swamiji, you mentioned that Patanjali recognizes the reality of objects, so he does not require nitya vastu viveka. But what about in terms of the Purusha and Prakriti, where does the object belong?
Well, all the objects are nothing but evolutes of Prakriti in Patanjali system. So when you practice yoga, you just go beyond your identification with the momentary objects. Objects exist, but you don't. You stop identifying yourself with these momentary things. So it is an evolution that happens to you, but you don't go beyond Prakriti. So it's important. See, Prakriti is not a Prakriti doesn't cease to exist. Your identification with the various evolutes of Prakriti, objects in the external world, that identification goes away and you realize your identity with Purusha. So, you should not bring in mithya in Yoga Sutra. Patanjali will be very angry with you if you use the word mithya when we discuss his system, because totally opposed. Patanjali system is a very realistic system. It is a pluralistic system in the sense it accepts more than one reality, more than one permanent reality, which is diametrically opposed to Vedanta, which expounds the idea of Maya, Mithya, where explaining the mystery of the absolute reality appearing as this changing relative world. So we should not mix one with the other. That's an important thing. We are actually, so we have two problems here. One problem is we sometimes forget that we are actually dealing with a different system of philosophy, not Advaita Vedanta. Remember, that's one thing. Secondly, how to relate this with our main spiritual goal, which is again linked to Vedanta. So there Shankaracharya will come to your rescue. He will come to your rescue. He says, when you understand, when you practice Ashtanga Yoga, when you transcend when you go beyond your identity with the Prakriti and its evolutes, then you are ready to take the next step. That is your mind becomes purified of all vrittis, and that is called Sattva Shuddhi or Chitta Shuddhi in Vedanta. Then slowly you are ready to study Vedanta. So actually, according to Shankaracharya, Patanjali system is only primary school. But primary school should not neglect primary school. It's an important stage of our education. So this is a dualistic system, in the sense pluralistic system. Advaita Vedanta is non-dualistic. So the concept of Maya should not be brought in this, except in the main context of, spiritual experience. Then you can bring in Maya, but it's not part of yoga system. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
So I just wanted to give a review or kind of recapitulation of what we have been discussing, because we didn't have any class for the last 1 month, even longer. So I thought it's a good idea to give a review of what we have been discussing till now. So thank you for all the questions, those who participated in this discussion. Thank you. Namaskar. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.